This is Monica Perez here with a not only a returning guest, but someone with whom I have shared a screen many times on Union of the Unwanted and other guest spots. We were on. You, of course, are one of the co-hosts of AM Wake Up, and I've been on that with you. This is Teace Snyder, and we're here to talk specifically about a film he made a while ago. But first, let's say hello. Hi, Teace. How are you doing?
Hey, Monica. Thanks for having me back on. Good to be here.
So I watched your film. This actually, I've saw it before, but I rewatched it for today, and it's called Hold Me. HoldMeTheMovie.com, I think, is a place where you can kind of value for value. You can get it free, but it's nice if people chip in because it actually does have such high production value. Quite nice, and it's very well done. And you are actually an actor in it, and what a great job you did, I have to say.
Thanks. I appreciate
I
it.
I mean, I was just, it was kind of freaky to see someone I've talked to, like on the big screen, as it were. So
Oh,
that
yeah.
was very cool. Very cool. So, but it's if you would, I don't want to describe it from my own terms. I'd rather you tell people what the film is about, why you made it, and how you made it actually, and then let's get into a conversation if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So the film is called Hold Me, and it's about a woman whose job it is to hold and console people who are being voluntarily euthanized. And it's set in a fictional, ambiguous location in the United States so that it wouldn't become too focused on the bureaucratic logistics of policy in any given region or another, and instead could be used as kind of just a general reflective apparatus for the viewer, wherever they're at in the world, to step back and look at the themes of doctor assisted dying, palliative care, hospice, and end of life caregiving, and how that's something that, generally speaking, we sort of just leave out of mind until it's at our front door. And that's kind of just something that I've always had the tendency to do with my artwork, is to use it as a catalyst for getting conversation about controversy going, because I think that that's the greatest power of art. It allows us to approach things that are otherwise too painful. And this is a film that touches on some very important subjects in an indirect, kind of ambiguous way, but it elicits from the viewer a lot of what they feel and what they have to say. And I think that's a lot more important. So that's kind of like the background behind it.
What was there anything that made you, I mean, that was a lot of time and effort, and you picked that subject. You could have picked other subjects. Was there anything that made that particular subject the thing that you felt was important to focus on right then?
So I got the original idea for the film. I was spooning with my girlfriend at the time, and I had a vivid flash from a picture of an anthropology textbook. And the anthropology textbook was of two people who, I think it was in Pompeii or something like that. And their last moment together, they had been buried by volcanic ash, and they held each other. And in getting that visual flash, I thought of how beautiful that would be if that were someone's job to do that. And so I started writing the script the next day. And that's kind of just something that, because I knew Hannah, who ended up playing the role in the film, the lead role, and the main character's name is Hannah. It's literally her name. And a variety of other people, Daniel Harry, who was also a lead in another short film I'd done,
I
Blindfold.
know, I
Yeah.
recognized him.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where, and like Rob Krakowski, who played the villain in the film, I've edited a short for him, and it's like Axel Stosny, who's the director of photography on it, who's also a producer, had previously dated Hannah. So it's one of those things where we all kind of knew each other, or if it was a friends of friends kind of thing. And I had already gone to film school, and after film school, what you're supposed to do is use your short film to get into festivals, to get funding, to be able to gradually kind of pander up the ladder of the entertainment mafia until eventually you sell your soul to Satan and do their bidding. But I'm not really down with that whole kind of thing. So I'm more like, all right, how can I do an independent film of a very
Right.
high quality? And that's what I wanted to do, was create something that would be meaningful to people so that they could have conversations about this kind of thing. And then yeah, that's kind of just the drive behind that idea.
It was very high quality, and I tuned in to watch the credits. I was interested in where it was made because I thought, well, I know he's Canadian, and do they have to pay for their own chemo in Canada? Because that was one little fact that was going on. And I was going to say, people get that here, whether they can pay for it or not. And yes, they do, but and it does bankrupt people in
Yeah.
the end. I mean, it is true. I have known people who've more than one person who had to declare bankruptcy. That's a whole nother, the whole chemo, the whole nother.
No,
Oh yeah.
no. I want to interject on that one because
Okay,
the number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States is medical debt. So it's one of the things where even if they'll give it to you, it's because it's there to clamp down on you later. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's pretty awful that, I mean, I've seen them. I was with my friend who was dying. I was not leaving her hospital bed until she died. I knew that. And the doctors were not communicating that with the family, but it was very clear to me because I knew that when you start hallucinating, your liver's not working anymore. It's something that happens sometimes when people are about to die of cancer, because the tumors in their liver keep their liver from functioning. So that's like when you really realize how important your liver is, you're dying of liver failure or whatever. I think she died of liver failure. But so when she started hallucinating, it's like, this is it. And the doctor was in the room trying to sell her a round of chemo. And I was like, are you suggesting? She didn't even know that she wasn't going home. And I said, are you suggesting that she's going to get to go home someday? And he said, who are you? It's like, and she said, well, what's the answer to that question? She actually only started hallucinating a little bit after that. But that was the same day. It was clear that she was never going to be able to take care of herself again if survive. It was a very terrible experience. But that's when I saw that they are just selling chemo. Sometimes. I mean, I don't. I don't know what I would do at what stage or whatever, but I could see there was a profit motive in that room that day.
Yeah. Yeah. The specter of it lingers. And anytime they're around, it's always kind of got its finger on the trigger of the decision that is made. And the efficacy of chemo, it's something like 2.5% after 5 years are still alive, something like that. It's really bleak and abysmal, but not, that almost takes away from just the interpersonal strain that you felt being there with a person who you love very much in a for-profit environment. And that's
it was when I reflect, it's taken me years to really piece together. Hey, I'm podcasting, which I texted earlier to everyone. Okay. So what I realized that many things that were very screwy about that experience, and I didn't know if they were selling her stuff, but there was a lot of just a lot of lying, just a lot of lying coming down the pike. But the chemo thing, I mean, people use it. I know, of course, who doesn't right now know several people on chemo. It may or may not extend their lives. I really don't know. I don't know. I'm very skeptical of pharma in general, but I also know that you don't know what you would do, or you don't know everything about the topic if it's not something that you have had to grapple with yourself or at least thoroughly research. And I haven't. I'm more down with prevention at this point. If we could please stop causing it, would be great. But yeah, so that's an integral part of your story. Is that that was no accident that you picked chemo, and the fact that it bankrupts people as one of the conflict.
So for everyone who's listening to the conversation, Monica and I are going to go into all kinds of spoilers for the film. So if you want to watch, if you want to watch the movie, first go to holdmethemovie.com, and then you can listen to the rest of this conversation, and that'll be picking up on it. I'm going to go specifically into the spoilers for the line she's referring to. It's when Hannah's receiving news that her mother isn't going to make it, and the doctor, who is Native American, not in a heavy-handed way, but that's Curtis Rind, the gentleman who I cast to play it, is Native. And one of the lines that he is saying is that there are cleansing techniques, there are shamans, there are a variety of other things
I heard
that people legitimately look into. And Hannah's response to that in a defensive manner is cheaper ways to die. And so that's one of those things where the mentality that people have, even after they recognize how broken the system is that they still have a tendency to gravitate towards whatever costs most as if it's the most effective. And so it's one of those lines that's in there in a way to shed light on the fact that even the people who are the protagonist, or even those who are beginning to exit the conventional framework of how things are done, are themselves still wrapped up in some modality of thought, which is a byproduct of these systems, the way in which they've been built. And to a certain extent, because of all of us being born into these systems, we all suffer from that. We think of medicine or illness or something along the approximate trajectory of what's been suggested to us, so that when we find ourselves in a moment of crisis, we're looking at the portfolio for what has the best price tag, because chances are that's our best chance to make it.
Right, and what everybody else is doing
Yeah.
is a part of it too, but that's interesting. So now the things that I've picked up on while watching the movie, I'm now thinking like every line was had a purpose, which
Oh, yeah.
nothing was accidental in that movie. So that I might even go and watch it a third time and not gloss over things that I'm like, I don't know about that, or not I don't know about, but like I wonder if that's what he meant.
Well,
And then
I
I'll go
could
back
talk.
and listen.
No, no, I could talk about a little bit the motivational thrust behind writing that way. And it gets down to it this way. A lot of what entertainment in a North American palette is basically just straight propaganda and entrainment. It tells you what to think, what to feel, how to feel, and it does it every single second that you're watching that reel. And because of that, it doesn't really feel like real life. It's like this simulacrum composition that's put together in order to elicit from you strong provocative reactions. That's it. There's a situation that happens, it's typically fairly heavy-handed, you will have a strong emotional reaction, there'll be some sort of like
Yeah,
revenge curve, or some sort of like,
pisses me
this is
off.
where,
Like, if I shed a tear
yeah.
to propaganda, I'm
Oh,
infuriated.
totally, totally. So but this is kind of the felt sense of the media that we are bombarded with all the time. But what if you get into the nuance of interpersonal relationships and how much just an eyebrow twitch or something phrased in one way or another can elicit from you your suspicions or your deeper insight into another person's position? What that means is that anytime you show someone anything, what the unspoken accompaniment on their end as the viewer are their assumptions. Your assumptions, anytime you are talking to another person, is an active participant in that conversation. It is an active participant in the degree to which you are engaged, or you inhibit or encumber your own active engagement because you are so encumbered by your own assumptions that you can't step beyond them. So, what you do when you're writing things is you almost write near a point of provocation and then you don't quite touch it. You sort of just like write around it. And by writing around it, that then elicits from the assumption of the viewer a stronger reaction without me being heavy handed in bringing that out of you. So it is unguided, unconventional, therapeutic accompaniment to grief that you have experienced in your own personal way that you can then use these characters as a catalyst to reflect on.
Did you use that not heavy-handed approach to be more effective at getting people to a conclusion that you think is right?
So the way that it works is that, and there's like a scene later on where Hannah bumps into a woman who used to do the like a guided euthanasia practice with her, and she had since quit. And she didn't know Hannah had quit. And they're having this conversation, and Hannah's like, I quit, right? And she's like, no, I didn't know that. And Hannah goes into it and she gives a line. It's like that she feels guilty. You can interpret her feeling guilty as if she is guilty because she literally helped murder people. You can interpret her feeling guilty as if she feels guilty because she stopped and she wanted to try and help people. You can interpret that one line in a variety of different ways, which to a certain extent align with your interpretation, or it can align with the exact opposite interpretation. And that's one of those things where it's up to you to stop yourself and to step back and say, well, that's interesting, because you could actually take it any number of different ways. And then it gets more basically sophisticated because we don't do that with things. It's so rare for us, like in a general sense, to step back from our initial impersonation or our initial assumption, or how hearted we have a tendency to be about that sort of thing, and to breathe and allow it to speak in a different way. And so I do that so that it will be a more meaningful sequence of events to you. but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be a conclusion that I have drawn for you.
I totally thought she felt guilty for quitting.
It could literally be any number of different combination of things, but I know what you mean.
Right. So Kat says ambiguity. If
Yeah.
you don't mind a little peanut gallery every once in a while.
Yeah, no, totally cool. And then so when you were watching the film, did you notice the vial?
Uh, I mean, there were a lot of vials
Okay,
with
so
the
the vial
syringes.
that like in the beginning of the film when she's in the bathtub, and then it cuts to the side where she's picking up the towel, and then I focus pull from the towel that she picked up. Did you see a little vial there next to the tub with her?
I probably did, but I don't remember seeing
Okay.
it.
So then later on, when she's waking up and she slept in, there's a vial that's blurry in front of her that shows up 3 or 4 different times. What it is it's you can, if you see that, you'll think she's using drugs. And that's the same vial that she's killing people with. If you don't see that, that assumption won't factor into the way that the script plays out. So I'm playing little
Didn't
games
see
like that with what you are or are not noticing, what you are or are not making an assumption about, what is or is not clarified in the script, what is deliberately kept from you. And then it just becomes this kind of thing where it's like, and it isn't a right or wrong thing. It's a personal journey for you. And it's in a very different kind of way than most conventional Western media is framed.
Yes, because when the suggestion was made that she was on drugs, I was like, no, she just dumped them down the sink. But
Yep.
that could have been her quitting.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
She was well cast to be ambiguously maybe drugging or not. You know what I mean? Because she's thin.
Large
I
eyeball.
mean, you could see it. Yeah. Yeah. Um, so do you have strong feelings about uh what I guess they call the right to die?
I have strong feelings about everything. It goes with being an artist, I guess. But yeah, my whole deal is that, and because I've recorded a few different conversations now with mutual friends of ours,
Yep.
like Charlie
Mhm.
Robinson. The one that I did with him is going to end up being titled "The Weaponization of Mercy," because that's sort of the reality of what we're looking at from a merciful perspective of trying to alleviate the anguish that someone feels in a legitimate period of their time where they are on the end of life and they have zero quality of life whatsoever. It is nothing but excruciating pain. I can understand that. I do not believe in the existence of the state. I think it is a fundamentally predatory and parasitic entity that will use whatever facet of life it can as a straitjacket to take everything from good and well-intentioned people. So in one interpersonal sense, I can understand the idea of it being merciful, but once you introduce the state in any capacity, it can automatically weaponize that mercy. And so
I
it's one of those
yeah,
things.
I
So,
totally agree. That was one of the things I had written, that there was a case, I don't know if you've heard of this case, the Netherlands,
yeah.
where the doctor, a person who had, I think, Alzheimer's, had seen her mother and uncles and stuff rot away in institutions for 10 years, crazy with Alzheimer's, whatever. She did not want that. So in sound mind, she wrote a note, when I think the time is right, I am going to exercise my right to euthanasia, because I don't want to live like that. It would be unbearable to me, something like that. So she was getting her ducks in a row in case she had to check all the boxes, because the law was pretty specific in the Netherlands of what it takes to be voluntarily euthanized. And you have to have an unbearable, basically, it literally says unbearable suffering.
Yeah.
So she wrote ahead of time that she would consider it unbearable to be non-compos mentis or whatever in an institution. Well, they put her in an institution, and which is true for everybody I've ever known who's been institutionalized for Alzheimer's. In the first 6 months, they really go crazy. They can't stand it. It's like putting a wild animal in a cage from my two experiences. And so she was acting like that, and they decided to euthanize her without asking her. They had no conversation with her at that point. They just observed her reaction to being institutionalized, and they said that it satisfied her criteria, and they put a sedative in her coffee, and when when they were going to euthanize her with the drug, she woke up and struggled, and her family held her down, and they continued to kill her. And the court said that was okay. Now, so I'm reading this and I'm saying, okay, that's step one in the slippery slope, because that's very different from what it said in the law, I felt. And one of the big problems in the Netherlands was doctors didn't want to do it because they didn't want to have liability. So they were very sure to make it that we will rule in favor of the doctor if there's any doubt. And then I thought, okay, once you get there, then you may get to mandates. You might get to where, okay, a person under the circumstance must go, or like they can euthanize children without their parents' consent in some circumstances. I think in the Netherlands, it's like 16, 17-year-olds who want to die. But I think there were other examples where it was kids who couldn't communicate at all and were apparently unbearably suffering, and the state decided that the parents were cruel to keep the kid alive, that kind of thing. So you're definitely going to hit a slippery slope like that, where it's not, there is in this, with this state, the state the way it is, you don't get a may, you get a mustn't or a must. You don't get permission, you get a mandate or you get forbidden. And that's what I worry about with this.
Yeah. So to really get into all of that on its deepest level, we'd have to go into social engineers and the nature of government and the various different oligarchic convergences of the systems that underpin the superficial bureaucracies that we exist in, that the allopathic Flexner report consolidation of our mindset that surrounds medicine is itself a long form machination of war, derived from the kind of life over limb sort of thing that was considered necessary in order to come out on top from First and Second World Wars, which were themselves ushered into existence by the Anglo-American establishment and then paid for by Wall Street. And so what you have is the emergence of mechanized industrialized warfare, and then the emergence of mechanized industrialized medicine, which is the sleeper modality of warfare that then becomes something that you can target all populations with. So when you start to understand that this is like 50 to 100-year margins of social engineer planning, and they can have these proxy war kind of like conventional shooting at a people warfare popping up, while simultaneously the social strata then becomes the story that you tell a population to socially condition and entrain them so that they see the idea of opting out voluntarily as if they're being a martyr for it. That's when you start to get into the Margaret Sanger kill them with kindness kind of mentality in a different modality. And that's much of what the long form kind of effervescence and emergence of these sort of things from the intricacy of social engineers looks like. Because on the surface level, we just look at it as, oh, that's merciful, that's important. But when you go further behind that to the people who view humanity as amoebas and it is their job to exterminate us, then it very quickly changes that bureaucratic from something that is basically being conscientious of another person to screw them, they're a remainder on a spreadsheet. And so for people who aren't familiar with that, but it's your audience, so chances are you're familiar with that, this gets a lot more deep and sinister than is touched on in the film.
I actually, one of the 3 things that I had here, I said, I understand social ethical question of suicide, assisted suicide. I understand strict libertarian position, but I can't go along with it for 3 reasons. One of them was the slippery slope. The second one, because there's always an ulterior motive. Policies don't get accepted because they're good or bad, right or wrong. They get accepted because they benefit someone somewhere, whether it's the culture of death, which is what Jorge named your conversation with. They want to promote for their sinister purposes, or social engineering, a la report from Iron Mountain and the COVID protocol, which was to kill the old, the weak, the disabled, the mentally ill. And for whatever other reasons they want it that way, they will have it that way.
Okay, so as a caveat and an extension of that notion with the COVID premise of being to kill the elderly, it's also with the notion of impregnating the mentality of the general population, whether this is real or not, with the long form notion that it's a slow motion genocide. And that's the idea that if you have received these poison injections, you are going to die this much younger, you're going to be this much more likely to get cancer, et cetera, and so forth. You can use that to splinter people's mindset in a variety of ways, be it transhumanism, opting out early, basically just living more frivolously, all kinds of different things. But the point is that the slow motion, like coming to the revelation of what it, not the method, not what they've done to us, right, but just the gradual slow cooking of that idea in your own mind what does that do to someone who no longer feels as if a long life is even an option for them? So if what we've been talking about in the truth movement about the dangerous side effects of these kinds of medical procedures then eventually makes its way into public consciousness, what does that then do to public consciousness who doesn't realize that there are alternative therapeutics outside of the allopathic model that could potentially save them? They might just at that point feel as if they're dead already. So it's a further extension of the entire COVID thing is what is the mindset of the population in thinking of their own longevity and resilience in their life and well-being? What does that even look like now?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, then you wouldn't need savings.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. They do not want you to have savings, and they do, and that's the I own nothing and I'm happy. Like they don't want, that's a big thing. They don't want you to have any surplus or need for surplus. Um, and extended family is not even, you don't need to return to extended family if you're really not going to have an extended life. So I see what you're saying there. I also feel like part of eliminating old people through COVID or like I'm just even talking about ventilators and stuff like in
Yeah.
that first year. Also this idea of not having the extended life, but euthanasia too, because I just went, I kind of talked to people along the way. I did podcasts along the way, but my mother died on February 1st and I was like visiting her a lot up until then because she had 9 kids. Well, she was down to 7 by the time she died, but she wouldn't have anybody outside the family take care of her. She wouldn't have hospice. She wouldn't have anything. So we all took turns taking care of her. And it was tricky. And I remember when she really got sick in December and people first started like talking about hospice forever. She's like, I'm absolutely not doing that. She was super Catholic and she was not going out as a suicide. That was her. And she just felt like there's 2 kinds of hospice. And if you get the wrong one, you're out. And she just wouldn't have it. She wouldn't have it. And I remember going in there thinking, and there were just so many shifts that we couldn't like partner up. We had to, you're kind of on your own. And it was difficult. And I just remember going in and just like deer in the headlights. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do this at all. And I just tried my best. I was like, hey man, you got an amateur here, right? I'm just going to do my best, but it could get ugly. And she's like, I don't care, whatever. I'm just gonna. And I was like, well, I'm praying that you don't suffer. Don't pray that I don't suffer. Just pray that I could take it. I just want to take it and do what I'm supposed to do. And I'm like, okay. So I mean, that was a real learning experience for me. Like, the older you get and the more control you have over your life, like, what do? I get up, I clean my house, I cook, for my kids, whatever. It's a very regimented life. I don't go out in the world that much. I don't have to expand my horizons, have new experiences. Maybe I go on a vacation and stay in a hotel. It's like not that big a deal, but this was very mind expanding. I never had an experience like that before. It was a real challenge. It was outside my wheelhouse. I fucking hate body fluids of any kind. I do not want to have to take care of somebody at all. But I didn't tell her that because it was very important that you cooperate and whatever. But it was like a privilege to be able to have that experience, to be selfless like that, to be with somebody who was dying, to see the importance of faith in that process, whether there is a God or there isn't. Pascal's wager doesn't even begin to tell you how, like, she dying well, like she was living for dying well. Like she just was going to die well. And it was a challenge. But I mean, so she was like getting up in the morning till the very end with a purpose in life. And on top of that, so I was with my daughter, she's 19 and she came to help a little bit. She was in the area. And I said, oh, I don't, I had told her, it's like, oh, grandma said we all have to take care of her because she's going to get us. This is how we're all going to get to heaven. We were going to, so when my daughter came, I thought I needed some help, but I didn't. And I didn't want to like have her do any like gross stuff. And I said, oh, don't worry about it. I got it. And she said, well, I want to go to heaven too. And she really felt that way. And she's not even, my daughter's not religious in the slightest bit, but she, modeling that example was so like it changed. It was an intergenerational shift that never would have happened before, and it was a shift into the future, but it was also drawing back to our like more human extended family past. And it was there was a lot of value there that it's hard to describe, and I appreciate that I had that opportunity. And I think that people with the euthanasia, like, they don't even know that it's possible that something that involves a lot of suffering can be really valuable and worthwhile.
It's a very interesting story and an important thing to go through firsthand, because a lot of people don't realize that they likely are going to end up being a caregiver or being in a much more vulnerable position than they'd initially thought. And there's a tremendous learning curve to the human experience that goes along with it, that as we're removed from those exposures to how to conduct ourselves, the easier it is to just mimic or model whatever it is we're shown. And that's increasingly reductionistic and mechanistic, and it isn't emblematic of our best sides as people or as family. So it's great that that you're able to be there with her in the end.
And one thing that the film brought out, which I I think is a social problem and makes it very difficult to do what I did, was the Hannah was she was busy. She didn't have a lot of money. She was pulled in different directions. The mother was pretty helpless. And there was a lot of guilt going around. People were feeling guilty all the way around. And it seemed very like, this is why I think there that we have so much euthanasia. And I'm just gonna say, if they prematurely start swabbing morphine inside your mouth in hospice, that's I feel like that's what I'm calling euthanasia. But maybe that maybe I misinterpreted, but that's what my mother was afraid of. And so when I feel like, because we don't take care of them, because there's a way out, because there's a clean, easy way to just bring hospice in if they're suffering, just, keep dosing them until they're not in suffering at all. But when you do that, I think that you may accelerate their death. You certainly make them easier to take care of. And, or you might, I mean, being incapacitated isn't, if you're on your own, it's not great to do that. But if the way our society is, because we're not used to that, we don't make accommodations for it the way you do maternity leave or paternity leave. If we were really required to do that and just drop everything, I mean, you'd have to have money in the bank, or somebody'd have to pay you for it, which, like, is tricky. But I feel like same thing with unwanted pregnancy. If you have abortion, like, there's no accommodation. All the strides we've made in women's lib, and there's no accommodation for an unwanted pregnancy. You're just, it's a problem. And I feel like if we were doing it more, or we demanded, or if we insisted upon accommodating, taking care of each other, we could eat away a little bit at the culture of death, which would be, in my opinion, abortion. And my mother says abortion, euthanasia, and war.
Yep, so I'd agree with that, and that's basically, you're describing what it is to care about other people and understand the frailty and just the vulnerability of life, and to view things in a delicate and tender lens that then keeps us grounded in nature and deeply connected with one another. And that is antithetical to the model that we exist in, that will continue to break us down and to grind us into a malleable putty so that we can be used to form whatever further extension that they desire from that system. And so it is one of those things where the title of the film, Hold Me, it is the idea of, I want another person to hold me. I want another person to be there with me, be that holding space with me, which is the terminology that can be used for when you're just end of life caregiver and you're there with someone, holding space with them, or just actually being there with them around another person and caring about them and seeing their time and their life as important. That isn't something we do right now. I mean, you can look at it in like a very kind of almost like funny lens. Think about the foot soldier who's just getting killed in an action movie. It's like, well, did he have a family? It's like, what was going on in his
I know.
life?
Or when I watch Blacklist, which is just a very, it's for the general population. It's not anything super high end or anything, but the protagonists, FBI agents, of course, in order to save each other's lives, they will kill dozens of innocent people. You know what I mean? A bus will roll over and blow up, and they're just like, "Thank goodness we got you out of there." And it's like, what are you talking
Yeah.
about?
So that's exactly it. In just about every entertainment amalgamative story arc that's churned out of Hollywood, it is the idea that the main characters or those who exist within the institutions or infrastructure that preside over those main characters are more important than the person working at McDonald's. And that's kind of just like how the whole thing is built. And our paychecks, our status, our class, the oligarchic caste system that we actually exist in, that's how it all functions. So if
Yeah.
you return it back to the point of actually recognizing another person, that all goes by the wayside. And so it's from the perspective of social engineers, the last thing on earth they want us to do is to genuinely value and love each other, and that includes end of life care.
Interesting. So do you so here's something I've been thinking about. I I'm with you. I feel like I'm moving. I was a very confident anarcho-capitalist. And now that I see, and I always kind of knew there was a possibility of, I was like, well, we're not going to get 7 billion sovereign nations. We're going to get world government. If we give up the nation state, we're going to get world government. So ideologically, I feel correct, but literally, I think it's a trap a little bit. So here we are in a state that I would say is not legitimate, but it does exist, and it has a bunch of laws and rules, and every single thing basically gets forbidden or mandated, it seems like to me. So in that context, if I had to throw the switch and say, as a hardcore libertarian, I would say voluntary euthanasia has to be permitted. But if we're going to have laws, I'm going to say no to that. Do you have an opinion? Or do you refuse to answer policy questions because you don't recognize the legitimacy of the state, which is what I used to do?
No, okay. So you can answer policy questions. You just don't use it using the definitions as prescribed by the state. So if you're going to talk about the law is inherent in nature. The law isn't something that's drafted by lawyers or upheld by judges. That's a subjective decree of law that then becomes lawfare. And that's how you terrorize a civilian population. If you're talking about the law, that is that morality is objective and it's inherent to nature, you can use the terminology of God's law. If God makes you uncomfortable, you can just say the creator of whatever realm we exist in, be it digital physics or whatever feels comfortable for you. But something did create this realm that we're all
God's law is fine with me.
Yeah, no, I know. For you, I'm just saying.
I know you.
No. It's just I always use like language qualifiers because some people you can be like, it's right here for this reason, and they're like, I feel uncomfortable with that one semantic descriptor, and it's like,
Yeah,
oh
I
my
get
God.
emails to that effect.
Yeah,
Like,
I
you
know,
said
but
blah blah blah, and I'm like,
yeah, no, totally. So it
sorry.
is a thing. Morality is objective and inherent to nature. It is immoral to murder another person. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a crown and then you draw an invisible line and say, oh, they were on that side, now it's okay to murder them. No, it isn't. It's still immoral. Your decree or getting a bunch of people together does not therefore make that moral to do to another person. Now, here's the thing. You do technically have the right to make the choice to kill yourself. You do have that right. Is that something that from a spiritual perspective you will receive demerits for? Yes, I would make the contention that if you do kill yourself prematurely prior to the point of the like time in which you are naturally going to pass, you are going to receive spiritual demerits for that. That said, you do still have the ability to make that choice for yourself. That is a reality.
Okay.
So what we're looking at from objective morality is that a person does have the right to make that choice. If you go into the metaphysical realm, repercussions for it, that's something where we can't necessarily prove that, but we can say, oh, well, might not be the right choice ultimately, but it is still a choice that somebody can do with their own consent. And this is why when you get into the karmic perspective of state lawfare and tricking us into giving our consent, it becomes so important to them because there is a consequential sort of
Mm.
like blowback that derives from violating the consent of others. And that's once again hard baked into nature. So if we as a species conduct ourselves in a way in which we do not adhere to law, which is inherent to nature, and instead disproportionately favor the law that we decree to be reality, then everything starts to get really, really sketchy in society, incrementally, eventually exponentially, until the entire thing collapses. So it is a very slippery slope. But on the other side, it is an individual choice that someone has the right to make for themselves. And if they give their consent to someone else to participate in that, technically they can do it without karmic consequence. But it starts to get really slippery and really messy. So shouldn't the thing that we're supposed to be doing as good people is to be there for each other? Aren't we supposed to be thinking of ways we can help one another have a quality of life, rather than, if everything comes down to the last ditch kind of like, okay, well, I'll kill you under these circumstances. Wait a minute, don't we have the energy to have a conversation about how to make things better? So that's when you get down to the brass tacks of like going the furthest direction in any given degree. Yes, you technically have that right. Is it right in the long run? Maybe not. Can you get other people in? Yes, if you give them your consent. Do you want to do that with the state? Absolutely not. It's illegitimate from a moral perspective. And it's all of that kind of stuff. But we should be talking about how to help each other live.
I'm going to say about involving other people, I'm going to say no, that's not okay because of this.
Okay.
Because if you cannot actually affect it on your own, then you may not actually have the right to do it. So the premise that you can do it on your own is that you have the power to do it and you're autonomous. But if you actually have to get somebody else to help you, I think maybe
What I'm saying is, from a karmic perspective, at that point, it wouldn't be murder, it would be killing someone. And the difference
I think
between
from a karmic perspective, both of them are wrong.
right. And what I'm saying is, when you enter into the metaphysical side of,
Yeah.
are there demerits spiritually for it? That's when you would venture into that extension of, it's still wrong because, and that's where that conversation would then go into. And
Right.
so
Okay.
we're almost like sectioning off reality in the
Yeah.
sense
Yeah.
of what happens after we die, what we can do while we're still alive, what is the worst threshold we're willing to accept from one another in our own conduct, does consent diminish that, and to what degree can we lend our extent and still exist in what we consider a moral realm. So it's a really vast and expansive conversation when you get into all those nuances. And then that comes with culture from individual people, religion, the expectation that it be so like family members caring for you at end of life versus a bureaucracy doing it. So it becomes one of those things where on a global stage, this is just like a massive conversation piece that's been going on for decades and will continue to moving into the future.
I wonder if you can, I hope this doesn't seem frivolous, but I wonder if you can help me articulate why it felt so awful to put my dog down, who it was the day. Like I've put dogs down before, maybe a day too soon, maybe a day too late. I think it's very, like, it was very important to, like, make sure it was the latest possible moment before she was really suffering, and that was the day. I think I nailed it. But I didn't just feel bad because I lost the dog, which is my favorite dog. She's very fluffy. But I felt guilty about it. And I talked to my husband, and he's like, "Yeah, you probably think you're playing God, but God gave you the animals. You're responsible for them, you know?" And I just still, I don't know if that satisfies you, or if you can just help me understand, like, why I just had such an emotional disconnect with my
Sure.
intellect.
Yeah, no, here, it's really simple. The most profound connection you're ever going to make with another person is in the most vulnerable moments of their life. And the most vulnerable moment of all of our life is as we approach the end of life. And to have another person with you in that period of time is a reminder of the delicacy and just how incredible a profound experience life is. So while yes, from the perspective of looking at it as sparing of mercy, removing of pain, all that kind of thing, you made the right decision. At the same time, you kept those kind of like tender moments between you and your friend at the very end out of your own life. And that is keeping from yourself a return to the beauty of what it is to be here in this fleeting time with one another. So that's one of the things where we intuitively can feel that it's so important. It's so invaluable. Why would we remove that from our shared experience as souls?
Uh, I will tell you, I want to say one last thing about the dog, but then I want to say something about that with regard to my mother. What I had not realized, really understood, because I was not raised with dogs. I don't consider myself a dog person, but my husband always has dogs, so and I always take care of them. But that I loved the dog. I loved the dog. I couldn't believe I loved the dog with my heart. The way, like, I've had cars that I've loved, but I didn't love the car, and I loved the dog, and I just, did not really realize it until that day. It was really crazy, um, and it's funny because it was a bit more emotional an experience for me than my mother, because for my mother, we had spent so much time, and, like, the day before she really, I don't know if she had a stroke or what, but she was totally out of it the last day, but, like, the day before that, she's like, "Well, I'm dying, and it's very peaceful." And I was like, "Oh, interesting." So we were all prepared, and it was getting impossible to take care of her, so, as it really distasteful as it sounds, there was a little bit of just, relief. We were exhausted and everything,
Okay.
but, I mean, we would have done anything to keep her going, but it just wasn't, it was fine. Um, but what I walked away from that was, you always I don't know the fear of death, how important it is in everything we do. If we're really walking around with this this secret, this compartment of death fear that really controls absolutely everything. I think Stefan Molyneux said that once, and I was like, "Really? You think that, like, my entire life is based around being afraid of death?" Maybe, but when I walked away, whatever it was, I certainly knew I was afraid of death. But when after that experience with my mother, I had a much I mean, I'm not gonna say no fear of death, but, like, I just felt like it was inevitable, it's gonna happen, you cannot stop that march of time, like, with the dog or my mother or whatever, like, once you're on that timeline, there is there's nothing else in life where you're just like, "Wow," like, no matter if I have to duck out, this timeline is still marching forward, there's no hold, there's no rescheduling, and I feel like just the inevitability of it, the certainty of it was actually a relief to experience. Like, I feel a little bit less afraid of death.
Yeah, no, like it's once again, that's a line in the film. Is this all feels like such a relief? It's like this
Yes,
sitting
I
on the
know, she said that, and I felt
yeah.
bad that I could relate to that.
No, no. Once again, I wrote this script in a way in which it's like this is going to go really close to a lot of things that people feel, and if you get into grief, like so, giving the example of your dog dying and feeling it more, this is actually something that we do with the compartmentalization of trauma, of grief, and a variety of different things that sort of sink into the subconscious or simply make us feel so uncomfortable that we aren't really willing to just face up to how much it affects us in our life. You can experience grief from years or decades ago almost in like a peripheral way when something else unrelated happens. So if a dog dies and you haven't like grieved your grandmother or something from years ago, that can be a trajectory by which all of the unresolved grief can now make its way through you in a way that does not disrupt your functionality in life. We're very resilient creatures in the way in which we're born. The system that we're born into takes advantage of that and brutalizes us. And then we can unfortunately become quite callous and far removed. But what grief therapy, and I don't mean that in a formal like DSM capacity, I just mean like you finding what is ever therapeutic for your grief. That can be art therapy, that can be like literally digging of the grave in a physical capacity. So
Mhm,
you can think of like men needing to do something physical to process
mhm.
the energy of what they're going through. All of that different stuff is something that generally speaking, we don't know anything about. We are dealing with our grief. usually through substance abuse or laughter or avoidance or just repression or outbursts of anger, however we can make it through. And whatever the greatest tools are or skill sets that lend the resilience to us to come to terms with the reality around us, we are so far removed from them, they almost feel foreign when we're introduced to them. The idea of being present with another person as they die, are you kidding me? Why on earth would I do something like that? Oh, wait a minute. It's a profound insight into the meaning of life. So we exist in a system that have removed us from death and told us that we're afraid of dying. What if we realize we're not afraid of dying? We're afraid of the life we've been living. Then things would really change.
I It's funny, the hold me thing, because I was one of the reasons I was so exhausted is that I just wouldn't leave my mother's side. I was like in the other room listening constantly, and then towards the end I wanted to sleep in the bed with her because she was agitated, and she was on this medicine. I think it was the medicine that made her hallucinate. So she'd wake up in the middle of the night and try to like help people. I'm like, Ma. And so why, when weird things are happening, check out pharma. Like the pharma could be the culprit. But anyway, so I was like worried. So I was sleeping with her and everything. I was totally exhausted. So two of my sisters arrived. They knew the end was near because my mother said the end is near. It's like, I'm just going to go out with my niece for a drink. And when I came back, I just slept on the couch. My other sister was in the room with her. And that was the night she died. And I felt bad. I was like, shit, I was there like every single night for so long. And like, that was the time. And it just like that kind of stuff. Then I watched your movie and I was like, I should have been right in the bed with her. I should have been spooning her. I should have been right there. But, whatever, you can't be silly like that. But one other thing you said was very interesting in that when my father died, I was in my 8th month of pregnancy with my son, and I had read like all this stuff about like mental issues that could happen. I think they did like a Nazi Germany story, like study where the boys were, or the children who were born to mothers who were under extreme stress had psych issues.
Yeah.
And I just I refused to have like grief hormones flooding my body. And I was super close to my dad, closer than to my mom. And I went to his funeral, of course, but I wouldn't engage in a lot of grieving because I was pregnant. And I just thought, well, I'll do it later. And I really never did it. And that was a long time ago until my mother died. And so what you're saying, like, it's like this ancillary thing or opens the door, you can drip in and whatever. And now I'm like so embarrassed because I'm like, here I am talking about my dad. It's my mother who just died. And I'm just like, look at this picture. He's so great, blah, blah, blah. And I hadn't, and also with the dog, like, so maybe it's just, you feel like you can handle it. You take as much as you can and then shut back down. I really don't know. I don't know how you know so much about it.
Oh, dude, like my mother is a video game and dream researcher. So she's an emeritus psychology professor who was summoned by the Dalai Lama because she was a part of the like academic community that finally allowed lucid dreaming to be taken seriously. My father's a neuropsychologist who works with diagnosing people who have a variety of different ailments and determining whether or not they're capable of living on their own. And my stepmother is a clinical psychologist. So I grew up around 3 psychologists trying to communicate as a child. And what I would do is I'd slather my hand along a keyboard and hit print so that I could show them the page and see if I'd spelled any words by mistake. So from a very early developmental
like the monkeys.
Pardon?
Like the monkeys of, long enough they can do A Tale of Two Cities or whatever. Like that's Darwin's theory is basically.
Well, I'm more just trying, because what I'm saying is that I know that I'm a writer at the very fabric,
right.
at the very depth of my being. And here I am surrounded by very smart people who are supposed to have tremendous insight into the human condition, but I can't communicate with them because they talk to me like I'm a child. And no matter how developmentally off the charts I am, I cannot communicate anything to them. So it's the gradual, like, pressure that comes along with being around other people and lacking the ability to articulate it and yet still feeling it build up inside of you. That then becomes a desire for storytelling. You don't just want to articulate, you want to express things that articulations may not allow feelings to be elicited because of. If you go out, I mean, think about it right now. Just walk up to another person and like tell them a poem, or like sing them a song, paint them a picture. Anything that comes from your creative side as a person, we have had outsourced to an industrial entertainment medium as the metric by which we go about taking that kind of thing in. Doesn't that mean that we're getting our deepest, most vulnerable reflections from the machine? What if we, as independent filmmakers, as content creators, as people who just want to connect with one another, step back and allow ourselves to express ourselves through art again? And it doesn't have to be good art in the sense of what we would expect coming out of the machine, but it would just be something that's really tender and vulnerable. Once again, we've been kept from that. So me, who I am, has always been trying to express that. But in a world that is designed to break you down and make it so that you aren't able to reach or extend to another person those feelings that are that deep down. You're supposed to hit some sort of barrier, some sort of lack of awareness within yourself. And then it's like, well, why don't I know that we exist in a machine that's designed to bludgeon us and keep us numb? To feel something like that is almost like to feel the side of yourself that is in that much pain. A lot of people just don't want to go to that feeling.
I did remember that I thought your mother was a psychologist, but I didn't realize how much there of that. What a crazy petri dish to like to grow in. But it's interesting the way you describe like the wanting to get it out and having to do it in the form of the story, because like funny things happen around my house. My son has Down syndrome, and it's really hard to relate how these funny little things that happen. And I think in order for me to like tell my listeners or whatever what happened, I would have to tell them the whole story. They would have to understand the setting. They would have to understand the personality. They would have to understand, that. So then when like this funny little thought would make sense and they could appreciate it, but that would be a lot of effort, and I probably couldn't do it anyway, but you do it and it works. And is it cathartic, or what's your response
Oh,
to it?
dude, look, like I am a massively depressed person, just as far as like, because I look at reality and I'm like, okay, no, not what is my preference, not what do I want to see, not like what is comfortable for me, what is it? And I do that in the sense of the research that I do, the stories that I tell, and I could do that for humor as well, because humor is another great way to look at reality for what it actually is, and then you can make people laugh with it just because of a little twist. So it's one of those things where you understand that whether you twist it or whether you feel like it's a knife that's been stuck in you and twisted, either way, it's kind of mere reflections of the same thing. It's both sides of the heart, so that when you feel like you're being really torn apart, you can almost allow yourself to feel that grief, and then that'll give you insights to the human experience that you can offer other people. So for me, it's just been one of those things where part of the process of growing up, the way that I have is just being brutally, just devastatingly depressed and morose most of the time. And then I describe the artistic transmutation process basically like this: it's your job to use your bare hands to knit razor wire and create a cashmere sweater. If there's a single strand of that thing that isn't absolutely perfect, like it doesn't even have to be cashmere. If it's cotton, all of a sudden your creation is going to make people feel cheap. So it isn't just the pain you go through in the transmutation. It has to then reach them in a way in which they don't have to experience a thing. Instead, it's just a beautiful garment that allows them and how they want to almost like wear that garment. It's like it turns your personal pain into something that's a product for them. That's sort of in a cathartic way is the process of art itself. So that just comes with the process for me. I just see it that way.
Well, what are you working on another topic as big and sensitive as this? I know you're doing a lot. I mean, you're very, very busy doing things that are every day, but is there anything as big as this coming
Oh,
up?
oh yeah, no, all of my projects are 5 to 10 or 15-year projects. The zombie book that I've been writing, which is like people are like, what? You make extremely sensitive films and then you make this other show about conspiracy that's
Oh,
like
it's gonna be
rap
great.
rabbit puppets. Yeah, but the zombie book, it's like
Zombies are super metaphorical.
Well, I have the first two out already, and then the first one is in an audiobook, and Daniel Harry, he's also one of the characters in that. So um, I've been writing that for 15 years. And basically what it is it's a metaphor for the truther movement and how we all know this stuff about the world. So it's a bunch of kids who grow up preparing for the end of the world, and then 20 years later it happens. But the thing that they aren't up for is the social strata, the isolation, and what that does to you when you're privy to reality before it eventually hits everybody. So there's the side of things that or I'm going to read the comment because when we feel someone is lacking for.
Sorry, I didn't mean to distract you. I was hoping we could get to the comments too, but
Sure.
keep
Well,
going.
so basically, just wrapping up the idea, all of my work are gigantic slices of major controversies that then come out in allegory or metaphor. To give you an example, the fourth book that I wrote was called Pop Culture, and it's about a woman who had her or okay, I have to be careful with the phrasing of this. It's about a woman named Joan, formerly a woman named John. It's about her life, the people in her life, and a penis in a pickle jar. So basically, the idea is that it's someone transitioning from male to female who then convinces the doctor to let her hold on to the remnants of her penis, and then she keeps it in her closet, almost like a skeleton in the closet kind of thing. Well, what does that say about the mindset of a person making a decision like that? So that's a way of stepping into an issue like transitioning and having it so that you can interpret it like a person who's making that decision. On the other side, it's a person who hasn't made that decision and is still clinging to things. So it's another way of like these major issues. All of my work touches on it and has over the course of like 30 plus years of writing. And the show that I'm making now, which is going to be another 5 years to finish, all of them touch on major emotional themes, societal themes, our coping mechanisms with them. And then I approach them in a way where I can give that to you and you can just be like, oh, well, I think and feel completely different now. And I didn't expect that because it was a story. So yeah, it's all I do. It's a continuation of that kind of thing.
Well, you're very good at it, and I it's something so completely beyond, so far outside my wheelhouse that I did find myself wondering during the movie Hold Me, uh, how much of the way it affected me was intentional, and I'm really surprised to find that it's not only intentional, it's artful, and the production value is super professional, but that I just, actually makes me feel like I've been underestimating how much the messages that you get from films
Oh
are
yeah.
intentional.
Oh yeah. This is the thing. Like I swear to God, if on a species level, and it's the Aristotle thing, it's give me a child to the age of 7 and I will show you the man. We have grown up with people
Yeah.
who were on leashes, who grew up with people who were on leashes. You can think of like, and this is both a succinct and a poor metaphor to juxtapose like the character of a person, but think of how we breed dogs over time to become more
Yeah.
docile. The storytelling modality, the language fluctuation. Like if you look at ISIS theaters, think of like Blavatsky, ISIS Unveiled. ISIS theaters was the first chain of theaters. They were used as like mass hypnosis for towns to get people to come in. If you actually get into the esoteric side of things and you understand that this is like movie magic, dream magic,
Yeah.
this is literally the predictive programming of the sentimentality and the receptivity to sentimentality that people have, and then how they function in the population as a result of that. So right now, a lot of the people, when you go out there and you're trying to connect to them and they're just not there, it's almost like Edward Scissorhands. Think of as a child, if you had your hands removed and you're either there with stumps trying to catch things or with these apparatuses that puncture things. We've all had different torturous mechanisms introduced to us through the entertainment, which is an entrainment system, then result in who we culminate as adults. And now we're in such deep, horrific pains as a result of it that we're trying to get back those sensitive kind of like feelings in our fingers again, looking at the bloody stumps of what were once our hands, saying, I don't want that to happen to my children.
It's how can any of us think? I think that about fluoride and stuff. They're like it completely, it numbs you out. And I just wonder, like, how have any of us resisted, or have we not?
Well, so technically, if you get down to what we are, what we're capable of, I use it to describe it
Okay.
thusly,
Yeah.
which is that if say that you have like your arms and one of them has a tourniquet on it and you've just never had that tourniquet off of it, to you the idea of having
Right.
an arm that you can use would
You
be
think it's
absurd.
cool.
Well, yeah,
Or
you have to
whatever. Yeah.
well, yeah, yeah. So the cumulative environment in which we live is the tourniquet. If you remove it, you have to go through the process of getting the blood flow back to the arm, gradually developing the muscles so they're not atrophied anymore, and then practicing the dexterity to eventually regain that ability. If we didn't have the tourniquet of the compulsory school system, of the allopathic, like reductionist method of medicine, of the industrial entertainment complex, of all of these various things around us, we would be on a completely other level. So
Right.
that we're able to think at all, we're kind
Yeah.
of like subsisting compared to where
Right.
we
I don't
could
need to
be.
break my arm, patting myself on the back to know, because I'm aware of the cage.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
But I did want to read some of these comments. They're not really questions, but I think they have value. Kat says, I think that you're afraid until it's your time. So until you're totally not afraid, it's not time. I actually noticed that with my father, my mother, and my aunts, who are all super religious. And I said, if they don't say they're ready to go, they don't go. And it was true for every one of them. Unfortunately, they get into a position of being quite miserable before they're like, okay, Jesus, take me. But I happen to notice that. Could be coincidence. Okay, or a tautology could be. Sonia says, I cared for my daddy until he passed a year ago, late April. Oh, my condolences. That is fresh. I was his main caregiver. I felt that it was an honor to take care of my daddy for the years that I did. Yes, I felt it was an honor and a privilege to take care of my mother. And she would say, you're so kind. You're so kind. I was like, I love taking care of you, Ma. And I did love it. And she used to also say, I feel so bad for people who have no one to take care of them. Like, she just, the idea, yes. So um I think of my situation, but a lot of people don't have the privilege of doing that. Kat says the sorrow we feel when we lose someone is, for lack of a better word, selfish, because we don't have that person or animal anymore, but they are free and flowing, so they're good. I get you. The Beansters Travels says putting a pet down is way more traumatic for me than when they die from illness or old age. Yes, to the point where I don't think I'm going to get another dog, because it was just awful. It was just awful, and I don't ever want to go through to one of the worst experiences of my life. And I don't see why I need to introduce worse experiences to my life again. Um, Knit razor wire with knit cashmere with. Were you saying, what were you saying? She's saying knit razor wire to cashmere. Is
Yeah,
that
yeah.
what you
So what
said?
I said is it's like taking your bare hands and knitting razor wire into a cashmere sweater. So
Ow.
you're feeling all of the pain that comes from whatever that
Uh,
raw feeling is, but when you give it to
oh,
someone else, it's a soft and cushy garment that they
I
can
did
wear.
not understand what you were saying. So thank you, Kat, for
Yep.
slowing me down on that one. That was very interesting. Um, well, I have to say, my mom only died in February, so I was surprised. I thought I was good to go. February, March, April, May, June, 4.5 months. I thought I was completely good to go. I'm like, Tease, happy to watch the movie. Love to have this conversation. Last night, I was like, I'm going to tell him I can't do this. I'm, I can't do it. I can't. I just was like, it was extremely, it was art. It was uncomfortable, and I just, I was like, just got to keep it together. So here we are. Thank you. It was good.
Well, you did great. I've always appreciated your perspective, and I'm happy to be able to hang out with you and talk to you again. And I'm sorry for your loss with your mother. You do incredible impersonations
Thank
of
you.
her, and they will live on
Oh
forever.
yeah, she loved it. She loved the show too. She loved it, and she said one of the last things I said, they want to know, Ma, like they want to pray for you. For what do you want them to pray for? And she said, well, tell them that I love them, and tell them to pray for world peace. So I think you can dig that. So tell people, like, all the things that you're doing. I'm surprised you have the time for the and wake up and all the other things that you do, but tell people what you're doing and where they can find all of it. if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an artist. I started writing my first book when I was 10 years old, and it's terrible. Like the first, I've written 10, and 5 of them are awful, and they'll never see the light of day. But the point is that I've been doing this from a very young age, and it really is my life purpose. So I'm an artist, writer, director, producer, editor, actor, illustrator, and most recently podcaster. To find my artwork, which I've put up online for free for everybody in accordance with the value for value model, you can go to teace.ca. That's TEACE .ca. That's where you can find all of my stuff, and that's all the books that I've written, short films, feature film, and the show that I make now. The show that I make now is called Conspiracy Synergy, and that's at conspiracysynergy.com. It's a very different kind of like feel to it than this film. Very fun, funny, upbeat, and it's a way of introducing people to the world of conspiracy, not theory, reality. And also wonderful content creators like Monica, who's on the list of one of the best alternative media people who's out there. And it's designed as an outreach tool for your friends and family. Because what I've learned over the course of my time as an activist and researching all of this, which has been about 15 to 18 or so years now, like I was first on the Corbett Report 12 years ago for the short film I'd made, Blindfold, and I only this past Monday got to talk to him again about this film. So it's one of those things where it is a very slow process of unfolding in order to be able to brush up against what we need to in an emotional way, because this is my number one conclusion. The thing that is keeping us most divided as people are our broken hearts, and where we're at in the process of having them broken, where we're at in the process of trying to mend them ourselves, and where we're at in the process of trying to come back together with other people. Because if you're trying to hug someone else while they're still clutching a wound, they're going to take it like you're attacking them. And so much of the dialogue that surrounds conspiracy and what is happening over the course of our lives is so contentious and painful that it feels like we're completely alone and we can't connect with one another again. So that's what the show Conspiracy Synergy is. It's, if you start from the first episode, you can watch it. It is an emotionally calibrated introduction for your friends and family who haven't been introduced to this reality, so they don't feel like it's too threatening, they don't feel like they're alone, and they don't feel like they're being attacked. And
My
that's
daughter, who is not, has not been initiated into the conspiracy stuff, she doesn't want to hear it, but boy, she loved your bunnies.
okay. So that's what I'm
She
saying.
watched
It's
it
like,
for the bunnies.
yep, and I've gotten that. I remember one family member of mine bumped into someone who knew my show, and they were just like, "The bunny guy." It's like, oh, I love
Yeah.
that guy. And it's like, so I'm the bunny guy. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
that's
it's
the thing.
just so it's just genius, and it's such it's just such a such an insight into psychology. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
no,
But
and so
I
that's
mean, I even love it.
no, and I
So,
appreciate that.
yeah, it's just a
And then
great entree.
the last one is this movie at the bottom of the screen now, holdmethemovie.com, which is what we've been having the conversation with about here today. And those are major projects that I've been working on. It's like Teace is my life's art. Hold Me took me 5 years to make, $100,000 that I spent personally. If you look at what the film actually should have cost, it should have been 500,000 to a million.
It's so
Uh,
professional. It's
oh no,
really,
like it's
really
it's a
professional.
solid good film.
I mean,
So
it's
you
really
yeah, if you're expecting it to just be some B movie, no, this is the kind of thing that you would see on Netflix. It is that kind of movie. I
and
put it
you should be
online.
an actor.
No,
I'm
no,
sorry,
I
I
do.
know that's like the least thing that you do, but
Yeah,
you were
yeah, that,
so
that.
handsome and great.
So
Really great.
it's a value for value model. The reason it's online for free is because you can use this film to have heartfelt connections with other people, to just share it with them, and they don't need to understand any of the conspiratorial stuff. They don't need to understand all the social engineering stuff. It is literally just a movie that you can watch with another person to value them as a person, and then share that time together. And a lot of my artwork in the build up to where I am now was geared from that mentality. Only recently, with making Conspiracy Synergy, have I attempted to actually forthright talk about the
Yeah.
reality with
Mhm.
people. Prior to that, I was at the point of you literally cannot talk to people. You can only make them feel comfortable, and then in time shared together, eventually broach those subjects through the indirect introduction of fiction. I don't know where people are at in their psychology or in their resilience. You're going to have to figure that out. But what I do is I create tools that allow you to connect with other people so you can have important conversations, so that we're able to amend those divisions and save the world by returning to a point where we're comfortable being vulnerable again, rather than just being so dead and bludgeoned all the time. And
Well,
those are the places
it's
you can find me.
so original and creative. But you also what days are you on AM Wake Up on
Oh, yeah.
Rockfin?
Yeah, so I also co-host a show called AM Wake Up, which Monica's been a guest on, and that's on Rockfin and Rumble, and I do Wednesdays. So I'm only there on Wednesdays. It's an everyday show. It's like you'll get your news 2 years or more in advance for what these shows are
Steve
planning.
is so smart. I just do not understand these people who uh vape or whatever and have that, like they have ram and rom. I just don't see. I could never do that. I can't eat
That's
CBD sometimes like the day before and still be as sharp as these guys are.
so that would be a period of acclimation. I am an off the charts pothead as a method of
I just can't.
coping.
I
So,
don't get it. Like you think it's acclimation? Okay. Well,
no,
I can't. I just don't have the time to get acclimated.
it's a
Looks like
high,
fun though.
no, it's like a highly variable thing. If you get into the Rastafarian tradition, it's something that's supposed to be used sparingly in a religious capacity. So the way in which we're using it in like a general frivolous way is actually dangerous and isn't
Okay.
necessarily advantageous to people.
Like
So,
tobacco with the Native Americans.
well, that's when you get
I
into all
think
these
they were
additives.
sparing. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Spiritual. Yeah.
what something is versus how it's used, and then like someone's intake is for it versus what then becomes abuse. It's a whole plethora of things, and that's kind of the other side of what I do. And what I'm up to right now is like I've got stacks of books around me in all directions, so many that I can't even pick them all
I
up.
know
And
the feeling.
it's like this is one book. It costs like $150.
Yeah, I know the feeling. What is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, and that's what I do all the time right now is I study. And that's because the
Right.
show Conspiracy Synergy is going to take me another 5 years to finish. And that's because I am trying to tell the story of the reality we live in, not just the problems that we have, but how we can get out of them and how we can create real world solutions. So I'm spending all of my time invested in understanding how to make things better. And I could sure use your help spreading the work that I've done. And the value for value system is it's all there for free. If you actually value it, then you can support me in any number of different ways. And it really means the world because it's an independent film that took me 5 years and breaking myself financially to be able to make. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like evergreen. It has lasting value. So people are going to get as much out of it today. I had to look twice. I was like, he looks younger. How long ago is this? Yeah. So I have no idea how long ago it was. No
Well,
idea.
that's the makeup in the film because if you're in a movie, you have to wear makeup. But it was like 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is ultimately at the end of it. I think this is what art should end up as. We shouldn't be making movies as for money projects that we then sell to each other. We should be making stories that we then put up line and share forever with one another. Art should be a catalog of what we share with each other.
And a catalyst as opposed to the propaganda that
Yeah.
has a purpose. Okay, let's leave it at that. Thank you so much, Teace. It is always so, I mean, I should have had a double espresso this time. So it's always a pleasure. Absolutely. I'm going to hit the outro. I want you to hang on for just a second so I can upload your end of the bargain here. And here it is.